My name is Chris Parker and I study a form of Malaysian martial art known as SILAT Fitrah. Pencak Silat is a generic term for the martial arts of Malaysia, Indonesia, parts of the Philippines. And SILAT Fitrah is a particular style and aspect of Silat that I teach. It was a name given to what I've learnt and studied and what I teach from my teacher, given that name by my teacher. When you ask what makes SILAT Fitrah different from other forms of Silat, or maybe even other forms of martial art, I'm not sure why we should just stay with one particular approach to martial art. I think the answer is twofold, really. On a physical level, most forms of Silat and many forms of martial arts, they have things in common. Most forms of Silat would include ground fighting and standing fighting, and have some throws and locking and takedown. It would include weaponry, particularly different forms of blade work. It would include a sense of ways of possibly managing multiple attackers. You'd find that in most styles of Silat, and in many other forms of martial art too, of course. And then you say, so what else makes it special? Honestly, the only thing that makes any martial art special or different are the people that do it. Martial art's not real. So it's not like saying what makes a Range Rover different to a Mercedes SUV, or what makes this type of car different to that type of car, this type of plane different to that type of plane. I think it's easy to have those conversations because they're tangible objects. Martial arts don't exist if we don't do them. So they're expressions of ourselves and our understanding of ourselves and our responses to whatever stimuli we're receiving in the environment, or that we're consciously or subconsciously aware of. So I don't think that ultimately, while I can give you, the easy answer and the obvious answer, which is there's nothing special in Silat physically because it's got all the elements you'd expect from an art called Pencak Silat that fits into that category. Ultimately, it's just about the people doing it. There isn't a tangible thing that you can see that says this is what makes it special. Different people, different teachers might have a different focus that they emphasise to students. For me, I'm at that stage of my life. I'm 60 in a moment or two, probably before we finish, and I really, lost any great focus on the, if you like, the bish bash bosh of martial art quite a long time ago, really a very long time ago. So whilst I still practice the physical stuff and still enjoy it and still see lots of benefit in it, for me the focus in my teaching, in my own practice, is always about the lessons that we can draw from the physicality of martial art and the sharing of experience with other people whilst doing that, whilst in that physicality. How we can draw out lessons and principles and points that we can apply to things that are generally far more important in life. So you take the term martial art, which we use so easily, and to me the two words remind me of, if you like, the two C's. There's the martial, which is combative, and there's the art, which is creative. So for me, martial art is the martial side means, am I developing some form of capability, physical and emotional and psychological, that might make me combatively better than I would have been without it? And the art word, the creative side, the other C, is about, can I use the practice of my art, my understanding of the principles of that art, to create things of value in my life, in my relationships, in the way I live my life. And that's where the two go together. If I don't have the art aspect, the creative aspect, if I don't learn how to use my martial art to create things of value in my life, I have no need for the combative, because there's nothing to defend. SILAT Fitrah, the Fitrah part of the name SILAT Fitrah means, there's no direct English translation actually of the Arabic word Fitrah, but in simple terms it means the essence or the natural starting point. There are different explanations and understandings of it, particularly if you studied it from an Islamic point of view, but we would think of SILAT Fitrah as the natural art of Malay self-defense. So it's about the natural starting point, without getting into the nature of fitrah philosophically or spiritually, which I'm not going to do. We can think of it as the natural art of SILAT Fitrah. So if you watched myself expressing the art, or Eddie, or one of the other students, you'd see common principles, but you'd see that we are all moving slightly differently, or preferring different responses or expressions given the same stimulus, because we're inherently slightly different in the way we operate and the way we respond to stimuli. My martial arts journey began in 1973 when I started training in Shotokan Karate in Nottingham under Sensei Shiro Asano. I'd always known that I wanted to do something like that, an individual activity. And I'd been attracted to combat sports for as long as I could remember. Was able to start training with Shiro Asano at the age of 16. Back then you had to be 16 at least to get into the class, to join the club, and I trained in Shotokan for approximately 9 years with different instructors. When Asano Sensei left what was the KUGB and formed the SKI, I stayed there. Then when I moved away, I joined the KUGB for a period of time. Was hugely inspired by the great Japanese and British Shotokan Sensei that were around, and still am, to be fair. And then I met the man who became my primary inspiration in life, not just in martial arts, Haji Bapak Guru Idris bin Alimuda. I met him in Cheltenham in 1976, I think it would have been, and began studying and learning from and being inspired by him as an 18, 19-year-old young man, and 40 years later I'm still being inspired by him. I think the interesting thing, I met Bapak Idris in Cheltenham when I was there as a student, and he's older than me, and he was there as a student. And it's one of those interesting things that we tend to feel sometimes that we need to travel the world to find the thing, or the person, or the source of the inspiration, or whatever it might be that we're looking for. And sometimes it's the lesson, I think, is actually with the house keys or the car keys. This is how I'd explain it, is that you're in a rush to leave and you're packing your bag and you've picked up your car keys and you put them down next to the phone in the hall, and then you're checking everything and you realise you haven't got your spectacles and they're up in the study, so you rush up to the study and your mind's racing because you need to get out the door, and then you get the spectacles and you put them in your pocket and you rush downstairs, and then you go, where are my car keys? So you go as far away in the house as you can. So you go to the study and they're not in the study, so you might have run into the bedroom and put them there instead from the study, so you check the bedroom, so maybe you went in the bathroom and put them on the towel, so you check, and they were right next to you in the first place. But we go as far away as we can, and sometimes what we're looking for in terms of another human being or a thing to study and focus on is closer to home than we think, and I think always what we're most looking for is closer to home than we think. Whatever self means, I think it could be that. I think we tend to go on journeys purely outward and very rarely go inward. And yet your physical martial arts teaches about the fact that there isn't a duality, that actually things are connected. So we have to break things down. We might say left and right, it's a left punch, it's a right elbow. And we have to have certain words that we use as instructors or as students to talk about a particular thing. But the danger of that is we create separation. So we hear students, somebody going, I'm left-handed rather than right-handed, I'm better with my left than my right. And actually it's still the whole core that's working. It's only the end bit that's the impacting bit. And so we know that to move forwards we have to move back slightly, to go left we have to go right, to go right we have to go left. To go outwards we need to go inwards first, I would suggest. Do I still train with Bapak? The answer is yes, but in ways that are appropriate and specific for how he feels me to study and learn right now. And I think that's true in anything, as we go through a progression, a range of experiences in any sort of discipline. The way we learn and the way we practice changes, and I think the way our teachers interact with us changes. And in the same way that we heard the very great martial artist Rick Young early today at this brilliant Eddie Quinn charity seminar. The way we heard Rick talk about at one point how he feels that he's really not quite as connected physically as he'd like to be. Because of course at his level he's looking for the next level, so he's aware of disconnects that most of us would never spot, because even at our much lower physical levels we're not aware of disconnects in the way that he is. And so I think people, as they make progress, they're always finding the next things they need to develop, the chinks in their armour, if you like, whether it's physical or otherwise. And I think teachers then adapt how they instruct and how they share information and the challenges they present to the students. You know, good teachers do it dependent on where the student is at in their own development. Why do I still practice martial arts? Because it's part of my daily practice. It's a part of being alive. I once interviewed, I had the great privilege for 13 years to be a columnist and write for what was undoubtedly at the time the world's greatest martial arts magazine, which was Terry O'Neill's Fighting Arts International. And I interviewed for one of those, for one of my articles, I interviewed a great friend of mine and one of Britain's greatest traditional classical martial artists, a gentleman called Nigel Sutton, who's been based out in Malaysia for a very long time. Very, very great martial artist, a man, the senior of the vast majority of us, and who's really walked the walk, living and training in Taiwan and China and Singapore and Malaysia for many years. He's a great gentleman, a great student, a great instructor, a fabulously experienced martial artist. And I said to him in the interview, why do you get up at 4:30 every morning so you can go and practice Tai Chi at 5 AM every morning? And his answer to me was the best one I've ever heard before or since. He said, if you're a martial artist, getting up to train is like going to the toilet. You just have to when you wake up. And I think it has to become a part of that thing. I mentioned earlier that about the importance of going in to come out. Martial arts should be something, it should be a part of you. It's something inside you that you express out. It's not an extra thing. As I said, it's not a separate thing. It's not a different tangible object. You know, people, I'm going to be doing a class later for Eddie as part of this great seminar, and we're going to use some blades, and there'll be people there who will become transfixed by the thing they're holding in their hand, and they'll forget themselves, and my job in part will be to remind them that it's them that's doing the training. The blade is just a tool, and the more they can connect with that, the more they'll be connecting with themselves. So if you're a martial artist, there isn't a choice of stopping and starting. It's, you know, what, Chris, why are you walking around with that spleen inside you? Well, because it's a part of me. Same thing. When I first started training in 1973 with Asano Sensei, did I feel excitement and thrill? And you know, Bruce Lee was known by then, of course. You know, I'd walked out of the cinema only about 4 weeks before I started training. You know, trying to point a finger at the moon because it was night time. You know, I'd been inspired. I always knew I wanted to do martial arts, and then I saw Bruce Lee, and I was like, wow. You know, clearly I've long since stopped trying to model my body on his. But when I went training with Asano Sensei, I was terrified. Every time I went training with Asano Sensei, I was terrified. There was it was a 2-mile walk to where he taught from my parents' home, and it was a long walk. I was scared to death. Sometimes he'd be in the class just doing something on his own, and I came to realise years later that that was his little time where he's going, if you watch closely, I'm demonstrating for you now. Because of course back then the traditional Japanese didn't teach the way we would teach now. They would demonstrate and push you and poke you and prod you and kick you and slap you, and it was fabulous training, I have to say. But I was always very scared. And I remember as a purple belt, or a purple and white belt, we were in a class and there were no senior grades. I think there was a brown belt, and then there was myself and a friend at purple and white belt, and then some green belts and whatever. And Asano Sensei took the class, which we didn't expect, and after about an hour he pulled out the brown belt to spar with him. And my friend and myself looked at each other because we were the next in the line, going, wow, we've only ever seen him do that with the Dan grades. Because some nights in the senior classes, Asano Sensei would just spar all the Dan grades, and the rest of us would watch and somehow think that by osmosis we could, you know. And actually to some degree I'm prepared to accept that if we knew how to watch, we maybe could have got something by osmosis too. And he did what he did with the brown belt, and then he called out my friend, the purple and white belt, and I thought, my goodness, he's going to do one of us as well. Because, you know, sometimes it's good to be in denial, because it just keeps you happy for that little bit longer. And then he finished sparring my friend, and he gestured to me and called me out. And I thought I'd always been scared going to train, and I realised at that point on those 5 steps from standing up and bowing and going, "Us sensei," and walking out, that I'd never really been scared going training, and now I knew what fear was. And it stayed with me because he taught in a public leisure centre. So we were in an area that next to us, with just some green curtaining between us, were the table tennis players. And Asano Sensei would just direct me around the room with this gliding, sliding footstep, with this sense of his hara just leading him and moving over the floor. And every now and again he'd just, you know, slap me or punch me, and I'd go ricocheting back. And at one point he didn't kick me, he pushed me. And I went flying back into the green curtains and through it and bashed one of the table tennis tables. And it was about the 3rd time I'd hit the net. And I heard this, I think it was a Scottish guy, if I remember correctly, obviously coaching table tennis, who's had enough now of this, swearing and throwing down his bat, and he came storming in and pushed his way through the black belts who were watching, waiting for their class to start. And I'd picked myself up and I'd staggered back, and I'm stood in front of Asano, and I'd thanked him appropriately for scaring me to death and knocking me around the room. And he's just staring at me, and he's in awe. The table tennis coach just barged straight in between us. And I was like rabbit in a headlights, because there's nothing going to stop me staring at Asano Sensei. And this guy went right next to him and started telling him what he shouldn't do and didn't own the place. And I think there might have been something like "We Won the War" might have gone on at some point, or something, you know. And Asano Sensei didn't even twitch and just looked at me, and I am looking at him thinking, oh my goodness, because he certainly is going to do nothing to you, but this must be annoying him. And when you go, there's only me. And the guy got no response and left. He might as well have been prodding and swearing at a wall. And then Asano said to him, "Hey!" And it's fabulous. There's all sorts of things that to make your bowels work well that you can buy from chemists. Trust me, there's easier ways. And he drove me around the room to the same part in front of the nets for the next 5 minutes, went to knock me into the nets again, and then backed off. My experience of training with Asano Sensei was fear, and my experience of spending one-on-one time with Bapak Idris, fear. So yes, I spend a lot of my time scaring myself. The fear didn't inspire me to train with Bapak Idris, and I was still training Shotokan for a period of time after we met. In fact, we met. He came into a Shotokan class I was teaching as a student. I'd been asked if I'd get involved in setting up a Shotokan Karate class at Gloucester Art College by a guy who ran the art college and he ran the bar, a gentleman called Harry, and he was a great character. He'd been in the military, he'd been a prisoner of war, he was a wrestler, a boxer. He was almost do the stereotype. He drank too much. His belly was big, his forearms were huge, his hands was huge, his nose was broken, he'd got the scars. He was a lovely guy. And he said, "Chris, we should set up a karate class here because all these artists, frankly, they need something, don't they, to make proper people out of them." And I knew a first dan, a KUGB first dan, and he said to me, "Chris, you do the first few classes, I'll come in and take over." And then Harry the barman said, "Look, I'll make sure that this little Malaysian student joins in. He's been here for a couple of years. He's done some training out, you know, he's done some training in Asia, I know he has." And I said, "Well, how do you know?" And he said, "I've been out in Asia. I know the bad ones, and he's a bad one." And I was like, "What do you mean a bad one?" And he went, "He's dangerous." He said, "So what happens every Saturday when we finish the disco, and I pack up all the money, I give it to him and he takes it across campus for me because he's one of those guys, you just have to kill him." And I went, "Oh, good. And you're sending him into this class, are you?" "Good." And I had no choice because we were starting on Tuesday, and I arrived early, and this Malaysian gentleman walked into the room, and I said, "Oh, are you Idris?" And he said, "Yes, you must be Chris." And I said, "Do you do SILAT?" Because I'd seen a one-page article in Fighting Arts International, an article by Don Drager about a form of SILAT. That was all I knew, that was it. And to be fair, in hindsight, the photo of that was from a village near the Thai border, so it was very much like a clinch and a knee strike. And he said, "Oh yeah, you know about SILAT?" And I went, "Oh yes." Which will not have, convinced him a jot. And he joined in the class, and I remember at one point, because they were all beginners, and he got a yellow belt in Taekwondo, and I said, "Look, we can progress into one-step sparring and free sparring. This is how things build up if you keep training." And I looked at Idris and said, "Would you, perhaps we could show them something like that?" And he went, oh no, no, please, thank you, no. And I remember saying to him, because, am I allowed to say arse? I remember saying to him, because I'm still capable of being an arse, and I really was then. I meant it well, but I didn't know how to look or listen, or I didn't understand what I was dealing with. I said to him, no, if you want to come out, we'll just do some slow one-step sparring, you will be safe. I promised him. And he went, no, please, please don't, please no. So I went, it's okay, don't worry. And we finished the class, and then he said, never shown any English people any SILAT, would you like to see some? And I said, yes, please. And he didn't say to me, and I so wish he had, it's okay, you'll be safe. And that was the first time we met.